All right, good morning. Welcome to day 4 of the Great American Outdoor Show. I am here with Mr. Dorge Huang and Jeremy Martin. Last year, at this time, we were probably doing the same thing.
Yep.
Probably so.
How's the show going for you so far?
Based on the show attendance as of this moment, I would say a little bit lower than last year.
Just a touch behind last year is kind of what we're thinking as well. But that said, we still get to talk to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
A lot of people coming through the booth. And the goal of this podcast, the goal of your pretty much life in archery is to educate people.
Absolutely. That's the reason I'm here.
So we're going to try to do some education today. And I want to talk about 4 or 5 topics that are probably the most misunderstood or misinformed topics of archery regarding the arrow itself. Okay? So I'm going to say I'm a Great American Outdoor Show consumer, and I'm coming to the Firenock booth, or I'm coming over to the Exodus booth to talk about arrows. And you guys are the professionals. And I'm going to give you a scenario, and you're going to tell me which topic do you think is more important, and which do you think is harder to convince the consumer to change. Okay? You up for that?
Yep, I'm always up for that because that's pretty much what I face every day.
Yeah. So, all right, the first 2 topics, I'm a consumer, and I want to come to you and I say, I'm not changing off of one of these, right? I want a 166.001 arrow. Does the 166 matter more, or does the .001 matter more or less? Which one?
If the idea is 166 and also 001,
Yep.
if that the answer between the two is, if you want a benefit, you're better off with just looking at the 166 and not worry about the 001.
Okay, so straightness is less important than shaft diameter.
Correct. The reason for that, because we need to understand the 166 construction process. There's only 2 major construction process of 166. One is a basic, both of them are basic roll. The one is a centerless grind process. The other is a roll process. So the strictness of the 166, because the way they are made, the strictness is really as less critical than it is, because if you really look at every single model of 166 besides the one I had, you put a caliper on the thickness of the wall, they're not the same.
Sure.
If from the front to the back, from side, look at basic 4 corners, your cardinal 4 corners of the thickness. If they are not quote-unquote 100% equivalent, the strictness you're looking for is the OD of the shaft, because most of the 166 is what you use called a centerless grind process. That means you grind it without controlling the center, which means the grinding process is just make the outside as strict as possible.
Okay.
So when an arrow flexes, it flexes from the weakest point. Well, actually, the weakest point from the arrow which is going to flex towards. And we pretty much know it will be, if we simply assume the material is homogeneous in the 166, which is a lot more than compared to the other, because the thickness is thicker. I mean, the ratio of thickness to the wall in the 166 is the highest.
Right.
Because the moment you go to the 125, except only one company I know would make the 125,000 in a hunting arrow, which they are not very successful for that exact reason. Now, if the wall thickness is not the same, the strictness of the arrow become less and less important, because when the arrow bend, it's going to go for the thinner side.
Sure.
Or
The
as the weaker side.
Yep.
So under that condition of the question of 166 and 001, the 166 is a more important factor over the 001.
Okay, so we're saying we'd rather you shoot a smaller diameter shaft than a straighter arrow.
Correct.
Jeremy, which of those 2 topics do you think the consumer has a harder time coming away from? Do you think it's harder to tell people straightness doesn't matter, or the shaft diameter doesn't matter?
Oh, it's by far the straightness.
You think it's harder to educate people on, like, you
Yes.
don't need a .001 arrow?
100%.
Why do you think that is?
The industry for
Just-
the past 50 years, that's what we've preached.
Yeah.
Straightness. That's every magazine ad you see, 001 straightness. And it's just been beat into our heads, and we've been taking that forever.
Sure. So
And
briefly tell me why the marketing or the industry or whatever we're telling people is misinformation.
Well, I think the biggest part of that is all we are paying for in a 001 is an extra sorting process, and they're charging you a premium price, and our arrows are already flexing an exorbitant amount of what, up to 500,000s, 250 to 500,000s. What's 1,000th going to do?
Right.
What's 4,000th going to do?
Right.
I mean, it's very negotiable.
And you can save a ton of money
Absolutely.
going
Yeah.
to a .006 even,
Yeah.
because I think the biggest thing that I've learned from Dorge and just the last couple years of manufacturing arrows and working and selling arrows is that I'm not a good enough archer to know the difference anyway.
Well,
Right.
actually, I won't say that. Let me bring this back at one point because I think a lot of people misunderstood. When you got a 001 and a 006 and you do not know how to build both, the 001 will win every time.
That's a good point.
That is a very important point because most people, since they don't know how to build arrow, the 001 gives them a very good margin of error to build a better arrow.
Okay.
Now, the moment you learn how to build an arrow, I can confidently say a 010 and a 001, if you don't shoot over 50 yards, they are about the same.
Really?
Because if you launch, the launch cycle is different. The arrow point movement is now 1,000 compared to 10,000. You exaggerate up to 60 yards. It may be a difference of an inch. Off an inch at 60 yards.
Right.
Now, if you build them even better, you control the. I mean, to be frank with you, I also learned very shortly is that when you buy a bundle of, say, 300 size arrow, okay,
Yeah.
the spine can be up and down as much as 15,000 each way.
Sure.
I mean, the better ones, like the X10s and so on, their spine is actually plus 5,000 each way. In other words, you buy a bundle of 300, you end up with 305 and 295.
Yeah.
But most arrow is between 290 and 310.
Yeah.
But some of them are as bad as 285 all the way to 320. And to make things worse, company from company, at time they make it, it can be a whole bundle of 290, 287 to 315. So that's where, and as a fact, I just talked to Marvin Carlston, one of the old original maker of carbon arrow, who used to be the president of GoTip. The only thing they can possibly reasonable sort is two things: weight and using a laser system straightness.
Straightness and weight.
Because by doing this too, they can only do this too with reasonable. That's the reason they can only use it as a charging and differentiation for different products. Because the original history of a 001 is that when GoTip come with the original GoTip hunters, they say that's not good. We need difference, but they only got one piece, which is original 246. So with the 1,000, they got a Pro Hunter. 3,000, they got a Hunter. 5,000 got Expedition. And 8,000 got Expedition Hunter. That's the only difference.
Sure.
And then slap a label on it.
Right.
So you make one product, you have 4 grades for 4 different prices. And they already make money on the 8,000 strictness.
Yeah. so the margin just increases the straighter.
But then at the same time, I'll give you a history. Back in the early 1990s, every 1,000 pieces of Pro Hunter, the 246 they make, they got a neighbor of 10%, that's 1,000.
Sure.
But then in the late 2010s, they are closing to 85 because Adelada is doing that for them,
Yep.
which is now the victory.
Yep.
Now they put it back to themselves.
Sure.
But then, of course, Marvin is no longer with the company. I don't know what they're doing now.
Yeah. So, okay, so that leads me into let's talk about the other side of this, the shaft diameter, because this is another, what I want to do here is cover each of these topics because all of them are going to be things that we can educate people on. So shaft diameter is the other end of that conversation with the consumer because we're not necessarily pushing people into a 166 arrow. We you know what I mean?
You want to find optimum.
Right. So what would be the conversation that you have, Jeremy, I'll start with you. What would be the conversation that you have with someone that's like, I got to shoot a 166 because the smaller the diameter, the less surface area, and the less wind drift.
Right.
Educate me on what's actually happening there.
Okay, so I try to keep it real simple with the customers. If they're wanting a 166 strictly because of penetration
Right.
or wind drift. We talk about vanes because that's what's making your arrow move left to right in the wind.
Sure.
So it's not always the diameter. And also for penetration, you're cutting at least a 1-inch hole. So what does a 166 or a 246 have to do with it?
Right.
In my opinion.
Yep.
So we just talk through that, and get a lot of feedback from the customer. I mean, I have, up to 2-3 hour conversations on phones or text message. So we just talk our way through it. It's sometimes they're dead set on it and they don't care and that's what they want, so that's what I build.
If I'm open to it, right? If I'm,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to understand. I want to know. Okay, what would be? Everyone tells me that if I have less surface area on my shaft, I'm going to get better penetration.
Right.
But I'm like, well, I'm open to shooting a 246. Tell me a little bit about the difference in the way the shaft behaves. That's going to aid either way.
Okay, so your 166 is definitely going to be the most durable as far as, impact.
Sure.
Because of the sheer wall thickness. Your 246 is going to be the most responsive as far as the typical hunting shaft goes. The 246 is going to recover a lot faster. It's going to still carry a lot of speed. I mean, regardless of that, but it's going to be more prone to breakage because of the thinner wall. So, I mean, I'm kind of known for the 204. So I'm the 204 guy. I'll push it 204s all day long because it's the combination of both.
Sure.
You get a little bit of diameter that you're looking for. You get a little bit of the recovery. Just mash it all together. The only thing is a lot of people don't like the half outserts.
Okay.
So we gotta talk about that as well.
Sure.
What do you do with your arrow when you're done running it through an animal?
Yeah.
Do you put it on the wall, or do you put it back in the quiver?
Yeah.
And I'm the kind of guy that puts mine on the wall. But if you're continuously running an arrow through an animal, it's usually a 246
Okay.
because that's the most, as far as component-wise,
You're right.
it's the most stable.
Sure.
For components.
Yeah. Dorge, give us the in the weeds version of what's happening, why we talk about wind drift and what actually an arrow is doing in the air. Mm-hmm. The shaft diameter is kind of misconceived here, so give us that information.
Let me give you an idea. We need to talk about different segments of the arrow in flight. Most people don't understand the first 20 yards of the arrow flight is one of the most unknown. Okay? Assuming that right now, let's do the benchmark on what are we dealing with. We're dealing with a 70-pound, 30-inch draw bow on a 32-inch arrow. Okay?
That's a long arrow.
Yes, that's a long arrow, but that is where we need to look at it when they are all 300 spine. Okay? Remember, so we have 2-inch overhang on the arrow shaft. The 166 would take you about 20 to 23 yards to recover.
Okay.
When I say recover, it's that the arrow will flex in the air within 50 thousandths for the rest of the way.
Sure.
Not the initials 12, 15, 18 inch based on the shaft diameter.
When we say recover, we're talking about stable flight.
First of all, there's no stable flight.
Well, I mean, like as stable as you can get. The
stable,
tight elliptical
the arrow,
spin.
Yep, the arrow is going to flex on itself by about 50,000 on the rest of the way. That's going to happen on the 166 about 20 to 23 yards. The 202 well built is going to be 20 yards. The 246 about 18, and the old double X75 is where the gold standard is about 16 yards.
Okay.
Which is reason that if you look at the older shop, the minimum requirement for a range is 16 yards because they are expected to shoot double the X675.
Right.
Now, as the reason for that, because as you increase the wall thickness, which will decrease the diameter, the memory effect of the shaft becomes significant. That's the reason the only way to play this is that you need to decrease the front of center on the thinner shaft in order to compensate it, because you are forcing the shaft to flex more. Mm-hmm. As you increase the frontal area weight, you also increase the magnitude of the flex of the shaft.
Sure.
Now, this is where the really comes in. If you have a thinner shaft, you're allowed to flex. You figure that you go through the wind easier. But you also forgot one thing. You have veins on it. I mean, if you look at every single commercial on all the Lightenachs, you'll see it, most of the arrow in the 166 will flex between 12 to 18 inch left and right when they first launch it.
Yeah, that's
That itself, you need to think about not the shaft diameter, but how big an effect of that vein to the wind, which is, I mean, if you listen to a podcast long enough, you understand that's where the crosswind signature and the entire area of air affected by the arrow.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, if you really draw a 166 on a table, or with a 166 outside diameter compared to two, say 2764, like a go-to triple X, the two circles are very similar in actual diameter of what you go through air. Then you put the vanes on it. It's pretty much no difference.
Right.
That means if you are able to make the arrow shoot as strict as possible with less than 5,000 flex at the range of roll, the 166 and 2764 technically have no difference.
Okay.
I mean, would there have a difference at 125 yards? Yes, there will be. I mean, anything would be.
Right. I have a little bit. I think I have a little bit different opinion on which one of those two topics is harder to convince the consumer. I think it's, in what I've dealt with, it's easier to get people to come off the straightness than to come off the diameter, because you can show people the flight difference. Mm-hmm. It's harder to show the penetration difference.
Well, actually, this is what happened. I think a lot of people, last year was the first year I actually looked at some basic, what you call it, amateur radio video on YouTube. You'll find out a whole bunch of guys shooting a brand new Hoyt, brand new Matthew, brand new Bowtech, shooting at the North Carolina, Georgia, or Florida deer.
Sure.
Shooting at under 20 yards, the arrow go in 3 inches on a 166. Mm-hmm. Then if you look at it, especially most of them shoot lighter arc, you can see the arrow go into the animal, the entire tail of the arrow flex back and forward. This time because it's anchored close to 20 inches.
Sure. Because
you can see the video. And people should instantly think through this. This is critical. If the arrow is flexing so much, because it have not finished the flex, the arrow is not penetrating straight,
right.
Which also means that the kinetic energy is all going to vectors. Mm-hmm. Your penetration have technically none.
Right.
So if you want to shoot an animal, say, that close, you're better off shooting the largest animal without veins and go with the heaviest front.
Yeah.
Because now it's just a whipping of a whip. It's a whipping of an arrow with a vein on it.
Sure. Yeah. I think, I think another concept or reason why it's a little bit easier is because typically the smaller in diameter you go, the more expensive the arrow gets.
Right.
And then when you go the opposite way with straightness, so I can tell you, like, hey, I'll sell you a 204 in a .001 for $250 a dozen bare shafts. Or I'll sell you a 204 and a .006 for $150. And then you can show them, like, I'll build this arrow to fly just as good as that .001 and you save $90.
Right.
And I think it's easier to maybe convince them to come off of that from that perspective because of price point.
Well, that actually is very true, but you need to understand the manufacturing process. It depends on how there is so many different manufacturing process to make an arrow. Based on the process and to be frank with you, one of the cheapest to make a 166 extruded. I mean, seriously, on the pure manufacturing process, you can build an arrow for under 70 cents in cost.
That's really cheap.
Yes, I know that. And if you mass produce it in an extrude process, the cheapest I've ever quoted is 43 cents a piece.
Wow.
But then, do you really want to use it? As I said, if you shoot anything 300 spine, it's not a bad deal. I'll give example.
400 or up, it's going to
No,
be
300 up. 300 and 350 is marginal.
Sure.
Because now you're dealing with extrusion. There's no protection. There's no what you call a shaft explosion protection. Mm-hmm. I mean, just like you can build. I mean, just like today's world. I think I use car as an example. You can build a car that can go really fast. The moment you take away all the safety precautions.
Yep.
Think about it. 90%, over 70% of the car that costs money now is based on safety precautions.
Sure.
You don't have crumple zone. You don't have anything. Just strict beams. The car is going to be light, heavy, good suspension.
Sure.
But then, do you really want to be in when you crash?
Yeah.
But the same thing with arrows. When the arrow failed, do you want to find out how it failed? That will cost you your arm. That's where the problem is.
Yeah, if it's costing me my arm now. If it kills the animal and then breaks, then I'm like, okay, it did its job. But if it breaks before it kills the animal, we got a problem.
Right. That's the reason,
Right.
just like in the industry, we notice every single arrow, they all have a stickers on it. Flex before shoot.
Right.
Because see, even the best arrow, if you do not take precaution and sort the arrow and inspect the arrow and shoot it, you're playing Russian roulette. Of course,
Sure.
the worse build the arrow, the more you're going to go into this area. Just like, I will just do a little bit advertising, like the Firenock arrow wave. When you break it, it's going to break into pieces.
Sure.
It will not spur.
Right.
If it spurs, it'll be so much cheaper to build.
Yeah, right.
And it'll give you the stiffness, the lightweight, the whole 9 yard.
Yep. All right. So those two topics, good. We're good on those. We're in agreement. This next one, I'm not going to compare it to anything because it's going to need its own topic. John Dudley talked on a podcast recently, and he said that this year's TAC event, he experienced the worst arrow flight he's ever seen. And he is saying the cause of that is high FOC, right? We've seen the trend.
Mm-hmm.
You came back from TAC, and you said, I just can't get over the arrow flight this year, the trajectory and all the bad stuff. So I'm a Great American Outdoor Show consumer. I consume a lot of content online, and I come to you and say, I'm going to build this arrow, and I'm going to shoot a 19% FOC arrow this year. I need you to build me an arrow. Talk me off the ledge. Jeremy, I'll start with you.
Talk you off the ledge. Well, the higher, it's a hard conversation to have because there's so much stuff out there that is pushing high, ultra high, extreme high, whatever they call it now. So we just try to have an honest conversation about, diminishing returns. I can load the front up as much as you want to load it up, but what is it actually doing for you, especially if we're talking TAC?
Right.
Why?
Well, so let's go back. TAC is easier to explain,
Yeah.
right? TAC's a little bit easier. Like, you're not going to shoot an 80-yard target very accurately with that. So let's just go into a hunting scenario.
Okay.
But I'm that guy, right?
Okay.
I'm a PA guy,
Right.
and I'm shooting. My max yardage is going to be 40 yards.
Okay.
Still kind of out there, right?
Right.
But I got to shoot a 19% FOC because Dr. Ashby said I do.
Okay. I would tend to agree with Dr. Ashby if you were shooting a stick and a string.
Okay.
And you were shooting a super slow, low speed. If you're a 50-pound guy, 50-pound draw guy, 26 inches, you're going to need some momentum. You're going to need some weight to carry you.
Yep.
But to say it needed to be all FOC, I don't totally agree with.
Okay.
Because we have ways to build the arrow to make it heavier with still the proper spine without putting a 300 grain broadhead on the front, which I think is ridiculous.
Right.
But and there's just some guys that you just can't talk them off that ledge. I mean, I'm going to be 100% honest. I've had customers not do a build because I told them I don't know what the FOC is. I don't look it up. I don't do the measurement. I don't do none of that. I build an arrow that's going to fly good.
Yeah.
And what it is, it is.
Right.
And they cannot handle that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We see that a lot.
Yeah.
Dorge, give us kind of like the technical reasoning on why maybe the high FOC is not the way to go with a modern compound.
That's the most important word, the modern compound. Okay? The word modern compound is not a good word. Because if you really enjoy hunting, I mean, PSC one of the few company who actually still give you a cam of 65% off.
Oh, PSC does?
Yes, but you have to special order it. The whole idea of high FOC with high let off, that's where the problem is. It's not high FOC is the problem. High FOC is fantastic for stick bow. Pecking bush needed if you can control your spine of your shaft.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason, if you can get a stick bow to shoot a high FOC, you pretty much got it.
Yep.
But then with the high let off modern compound, with the high FOC, there's the worst of both worlds. Because you need to look at first of all, you need to understand what high let off means. High let off means that you pull back holding a very small percentage of the power, which also instantly equivalent to a longer duration of power stroke. Mm-hmm. That means the time is being applied power to the arrow shaft, which is equivalent to the amount of the arrow need to resist that pressure, the duration. the duration of time taken. That's where most of the problem it is. I really do not know how to tone it down because see, this is the worst case scenario. Now the arrow had to resist the flex and still recover from it. Now with the heavy FOC, the momentum of what you're resisting is significantly more, which means the spine of the shaft is significantly decreases, which means the arrow is going to take even longer time to recover. Your penetration begin to suffer.
Right. So I think the simple way that I like to tell people is that it's just harder to get, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's harder to get perfect arrow flight when your arrow is so far out of balance.
Okay, let me put it back one way. It is easy to get one arrow to fly exactly the same, but not more than one.
That's a good point too.
Do you know why?
Well,
Because you're compressing each of the arrow to its maximum
Right.
and beyond.
Yeah.
So each of the arrow is going to behave differently, which make every single arrow a separate tune.
which is probably why
Impossible.
Troy Fowler tells everyone that they need to paper tune every arrow.
Correct.
Right.
Because you're pushing the spine characteristic of each arrow to its max. And as I said, when you buy a bundle of arrow, none of the spine is exact. When you're pushing it, then you're going to make the 290 show up between the 310. Extreme.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I didn't think of it that way. I started thinking about it as you were talking about it, and I was like, okay, that's going to make sense.
Mhm.
But what we need to be chasing is not a number. We need to be chasing a characteristic.
Correct. See, as a matter of fact, I got customer come to me. They absolutely no question. They shooting the freaking 175 grain with a 100 grain insert. Can you make it shoot? Answers yes. But now you need to think of how do you make the arrow to behave the way you want to behave.
Yep.
That's where arrow concept kick in. I put the arrow in the front, one in the back, and now you change the entire flex trajectory. The parabolic action of shaft is minimized. The oscillation process is minimized. Now the arrow is shootable. But then theoretically, you are decreasing, you're forcing the arrow to decrease its parabolic action in flight,
Okay.
which now the FOC will, but then you also increase the entire arrow weight. Now you also decreases the entire, though you increase the pin gaps, which means your arrow is more prone in hunting. So, how do I say it? Just like everything in life, there's no free lunch.
Yeah.
What are you giving up?
Yeah.
What are you actually giving up, and is it worth it?
Right. I think I listened to. Jeremy, do you listen to podcasts?
Oh yeah.
Dorge, do you?
Seldom,
Do you-
because I just got too many stuff to listen.
Sure. So there was an interesting podcast with Josh Jones, MFJJ.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon McDonald was kind of like the narrator, and Troy Fowler. And they were just talking through kind of all of this stuff. And it was a good conversation. And Brandon McDonald brought up a really good point. And he said that Troy is educating people based on a different worst case scenario than we are educating people on.
Right.
Troy's worst case scenario is you hit forward. A lot of other people in the archery industry's worst case scenario is hitting backwards. So the Troy's information makes sense when you're aiming for the lower part of the heart. And then if you hit forward, you're crushing the leg bone. And on a pig, which is what he's shooting a lot of, the vitals are right behind the shoulder. So you have to get through it. And then what are most people hunting? Whitetails.
Mm-hmm.
The vitals are in a different place. So your aiming point should be further back. So we have two different worst case scenarios, and that's why like no one can agree on which way do we need to go.
Right.
What we're saying is you need to be more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to shoot a straighter arrow, and you need to get there as fast as you can.
Correct, because see, the manual will move, and not to mention there's other factors. Just like I'm more into crossbow, because all my customer is older, they're more educated, they're actually more experienced.
Whoa.
No, because they make more error. They had make more error
I'm
than
just
most.
kidding. I'm just kidding.
I mean, a lot of people, based on age, you usually learn from mistakes. And of course, we got exception to that rule, which I have seen a few. But then you need to understand when you're dealing with arrow flight, I think the most important word that I want to sort of make everybody recognize is optimal. It's not which way of the extreme. So you need to look at the basic chart, like your speed, your penetration, your forgiveness, your trajectory, your flatness. Look at the 6 points. Okay? Then draw your arrow. You want to be as nice a circle as you can get
To touch all of those
to
things.
touch all of them.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, at this current moment, I can pretty much based on if you want to shoot a 95% out of bow, technically the only way to get it is shooting a 300 size ID with the Aero Concept 2.0. That will give you the best of everything.
Sure.
Now
then
tell
you-
a hunter that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the thing. I find it really weird. You know, crossbow guys, I've shot a crossbow. My son shoots a crossbow. They shoot a 300 ID shaft. Nobody blinks about it.
Yeah.
You tell them to shoot a 300 ID through a vertical bow.
Won't do it.
They're going to look at you like you're standing on your head.
Yeah.
It's absurd to think that you use a quote unquote target shaft to kill deer.
Yeah.
Or, you know, whatever you're hunting. But
I don't necessarily think that a lot of compound guys that are going towards the smaller diameter shafts know what size a crossbow bolt or arrow is.
right.
Because they've never seen one or whatever. I didn't know. I was like, I probably fell along the lines like you just cut the arrow shorter and you shoot it out.
Right.
Like it
Well,
can
in
be
the old
whatever.
days, it is the size. Because you understand the one in this current world, if you want to buy the best arrow you can buy, shooting a 70-pound, 30-inch bow, if you don't want anything, you want an arrow that will give you the most efficient, you're shooting 80 to 85% of, is a Gold Tip 22. And guess what a Gold Tip 22
target
is?
shaft.
No, it's not. It is the old XX75 in the carbon form.
Oh, the aluminum shaft. Okay,
Correct.
okay,
It is the
okay.
original size, XX2264. So if you think about it, our father, our grandfather, and beyond, when first come out, everybody, that XX75 have proven itself is the best diameter shaft ever to shoot based on a broadhead.
And that's because of flight characteristics?
No, recovery characteristic,
Well, sure.
which is flight characteristic,
Yeah.
yes.
So
Not-
I got something that I just want to throw in there. You know, we've talked about, you know, John Dudley, you know, and then you got Randy Hendricks, all these old guys that are like assassins.
Right.
You know, back in the late 80s, early 90s, what era was they using? They was using probably a 2213.
Yeah.
That's a 300.
Yeah.
But now they're like, oh my, no, we can't do that. You know, we got to be shooting a 166 with.
Well, it's even those same guys doing it.
Exactly, 100%. It's the same exact guys that was shooting 2213s, 2212s, you know, 2219s way back then
Yeah.
that are now like, oh, that's like a cardinal sin to be shooting something that's over, you know, if it's over 204, it's almost, you know, like you're way outside of the box, and it's just absurd in my book. I mean, if it works, shoot it.
Yeah, when I look at, when I talk to consumers my age and younger,
Oh, they don't have a clue what an aluminum shaft is.
well, that's part of it. But also, when I tell someone that the 246 is a standard diameter shaft, that's like doesn't make sense to them.
No.
They're like, what do you mean standard? Like, well, that's like the standard diameter shaft. Everything under that is smaller.
Right.
And they're like, no, there's not. Like, they would think that is the standard.
Right, and everything
204, the
else
ones-
is.
Do you
Yeah.
know why 246 is the standard?
components.
No, because at the moment of building arrows, when Gold Tip, Beeman, all the rest of the company try to build a carbon shaft, to build a carbon shaft at the 2264 size, which is what Gold Tip 22 is extremely difficult. We're talking back in the 1990s. So in order to make a shaft that's cheap enough, good enough, based on the material of the day, based on the method built of the day, the 246, 244, 243, 245, which is what standard is. That's the reason if you look at it, the 244 is what Carbon Express is, 245 is what Black Eagle is, 246 is what Gold Tip is, and 243 is what the Carbon Force is. They're all around that area because that, based on the material, based on the approach to build, the methodology to build it, that is the most efficient. I mean, can they build thinner? Yes, they can. I mean, that's the reason back then, compare 246 and 300, that would go to 22. Remember, 300 ID, the outside is 2264. For the guys who really don't know the specifications, when you say 2219, what does that really mean? That means the first two number is based on 22/64. That means that's the OD of the shaft, and the 19 is the thickness of the aluminum.
Right.
So you can have 2219 compared to 2213. That's 6,000 thickness difference. That's how you make the different spine to shoot.
Sure. That makes
So,
sense.
so you need to understand. So just like everything we do today, is actually based on the history that we have accumulated. But unfortunately, people keep throwing history away and say, "Well, we do it now this way,"
Yeah.
and then they find out what are the benefit you get out of it,
Right.
which is a lot of very unfortunate situation. And I think we need to, as me being sort of a quasi-professor for all my life, I think what they give you is not just the fundamental, but the history and the reason and the build-up of why we're doing this today and
Yeah.
the way we did it.
Right. So now let me ask you this. Which of those two topics, shaft diameter, FOC, which one's harder to get the consumer to change their mind on?
FOC is easy for me because I can just put a different broadout and tell them to shoot it. The result is obvious. There's
Right.
no if.
But so is it that obvious though? Like you can only shoot I only care about what it does to an animal. I don't care what it does on a target.
No. See, this is another thing. A lot of people don't understand. When you shoot a heavy FOC arrow, and then you see how the arrow impact the target, especially now the time, use a foam target to show them. Shoot the ammo with heavy FOC at 60 yards and look at how the arrow hit the target. Yes, if you aim the ammo at the heart, and where is that arrow going through the animal, what are you killing?
Right.
You're killing under the heart now.
Yeah. Because of the angle of the penetration. Jeremy, do you think it's harder to tell people that they don't need high FOC or they don't need micro diameter arrows?
That's like a double-edged sword. I mean, they're both
Very passionate about
very
both.
yeah. Those two groups of, and I hate to like segregate people, but the high FOC group, that group of folks, I mean, it's like talking to a brick wall sometimes.
Sure.
But if they're open, and a lot of the younger crowd, I hate to say it, they're more naive, so they're willing to listen a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can just get your foot in the door and start to show them facts and, obviously YouTube videos. There's a couple companies out there that's done some really good videos on super heavy arrows, super high FOC, and why it is not good. We can listen to the Ashby theory all day long. That guy was great. And I'm sure Range Fairy, I can shoot at a pig 17 yards away sitting eating corn all day long too. It's not moving.
Right.
What we're killing's moving.
Yeah.
So I don't. That's a tough one.
Let me bring
it's
it
very
to
hard
this.
to figure that out.
Let me bring it this is where YouTube and all the social media really screw up. I did mean screw up. How many people show the percentage of heavy FOC miss the arrow and not kill it?
Yeah, and you don't see that.
No, you never see it.
To be frank with you, if you are able to make a heavy FOC thin arrow connect with the animal, you win already.
Right.
The problem is that how many of them do not connect?
Right. Yeah, I think not to toot my own horn, but I did a pretty good video on shooting a I forget what the grains were. One was like 400 grain arrow, one was like a 500 grain arrow, and one was like 600 grain arrow. And I showed the difference of time to target, and kinetic energy and momentum at range, at each different range for each different arrow. And the time to target significant. It was like when you put it into percentages, when you say it's like 0.01 second different, but that's 30% of the time the arrow's in flight, you start realizing like, oh wow, that arrow takes 30% longer to get to the target than a 400 grain arrow. So I think if you're interested in seeing some numbers on that, there is a video. But
I don't think those numbers are really as critical as possible as I thought it is, because if you have heavy FOC, thin arrows and so on, when you make the perfect connection, the after you connect is wonderful because momentum is on your side, slug force is on your side, penetration is on your side, everything's on your side. But the problem is that how many of those arrows that never connected
Right.
because of unforgiveness?
sure, yeah, because of the trajectory and the time to target.
Correct. Then all of a sudden, how many video you will see that people actually miss with those?
Yeah.
None.
No.
So whatever you see is the few percentage on the people who shot at 5 deer and finally one connected. That's the one you saw.
Right.
But the fact is that after you connected, heavy FOC thin arrow do have an extreme advantage because it's more durable. It go in with force, or go in that you go in with shoulder blades, no problem. But the fact is that if you never connected, who cares what they're hitting?
Right. Yeah. You're going to penetrate like hell into the ground.
So, Cam, back to your original question to me, and I'm sitting here thinking while Dorge is talking. You know, for my customer is, I'm not so much worried if I can make a 204, a 166, or a 246 shoot. I mean, I can make a good quality product with any one of those 3 size diameters. Let's not concentrate on FOC. Let me build you an arrow that's going to be accurate.
Yeah.
Now he's talking.
And that's all I'm worried about.
Right.
FOC is kind of an afterthought to me.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I've already said it here in this show that, you know, they've asked me, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Right.
Well, you can do the math when you get them, but I don't know.
Do you have an idea of where they where they typically fall?
You want me to be 100% honest?
Yeah.
Nope.
No.
Don't have.
I
a clue.
know for me, the typical for me to build an arrow is between 9 to 12.
That's what we're seeing too.
I mean, that would be my guess, but I've never like done it on customers' dozen arrows, so I couldn't tell you.
On the 204, on the NIS, we'll get some that creep up into the 15.
Yes, that will.
With the stainless steel insert, then you throw a 150 grain head on it or something. Some will creep up into the 15s.
Right.
And we haven't had negative feedback on it, but I'm willing to bet if that person took the 150 grain head and put a 100 grain head on it, the flight would probably
Or even
probably
a
be
75
better.
grain head.
Right, and
Because
you cannot get hunters to do that.
That's yeah.
I won't do it.
You say sub 100 to a hunter on a broadhead, and they look at you and giggle.
I won't do it. It's in my brain or whatever. That's something you won't be able to talk me off the ledge on.
Well, but then with that, remember the customer we have, 26 inch draw, a 45-pound pull. What the heck do you think you're going to put on it?
Right.
I mean, for the first probably 10 years I hunted in the early 90s, I was using a 75 grain rocket mini blaster, expandable blade broadhead coming out of a 55-pound bow, and I mean it killed animals.
Yeah.
I killed quite a few animals with it, but I
think we make killing animals harder than it is.
Oh yeah, I mean
I think it's like, and here's another point that I want to make before we have to wrap this up and the national anthem starts coming on. We spent, let's just say this was an hour-long conversation. We spent 43 minutes now talking about the arrow, and what is really more important is the broadhead. 90% of your killing comes from what broadhead are you shooting, and nobody talks about it enough.
Well,
There's not enough
actually,
emphasis put on the broadhead.
This is where I think the real conversation is like doing with cars. You want to talk a sports car. Do you want to talk tires, suspension, chassis, or tires? The answer is that it has to be all of the above working together in sync.
Sure.
Just like you say, that's the reason my conversation with all my customers, the first thing I always ask, what broadhead you have to shoot? I will build from there. Because most people are so passionate about the broadhead. I will tell them, you want to shoot a 175, whatever that is, a silver flame, that's the one you want to shoot. I pretty much throw half the stuff away, say, okay, I may not be able to build it, but what kind of bow you shoot? When that two things come together, then you can envision the arrow, because you have to really physically look at that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I think the education that we see online needs to be more about, like, I think there just needs to be more conversation about the broadhead and not on the arrow's weight.
No, actually, I think that is a wrong way to put it, seriously. Because see, just to put it this way, you're shooting a silver flame or shooting an iron wheel. It's pretty much no good if you want to put an NIS with the arrow vane on it. You can't shoot it.
With the arrow vane, yeah.
Yeah, you can't shoot it.
Yeah.
You literally cannot. Especially if the guy want to shoot an 80-pound bow with a 31-inch draw. There's no way in hell you can do it.
But in my opinion, I would rather, it depends, I would rather talk to that guy about his broadhead than changing the arrow.
Well, but it will be okay, but most of the guys who actually call me, those are the guys who had to read enough. It's close to impossible for them to change the broadhead.
Yeah.
So the
because
only
they've
thing
spent so much on it.
they
But-
already bought it.
But here's the thing: go to Facebook Marketplace, put it online. People are going to buy it, sell it.
100%. And I'm kind of every year I've got a different broadhead sitting on the front of my arrow. I mean, golly knows what I'll be shooting this year.
Right.
But that's one thing. That's probably one of the first questions I ask. What broadhead are you shooting?
Yeah,
Because
that's what it should be.
that's going to dictate the way the rest of this conversation goes.
Right.
You know, if you're shooting an iron wheel, or if you're shooting, and not saying that these heads are bad by no stretch of the imagination. You know, the Annihilator. Okay, those two arrows, the regular Exodus. You're not shooting an arrow vein.
No, yeah.
You're going to be shooting a Boning Blazer or a
Mini double
AE,
extent, yep.
HP, something like that. You're not going to be shooting something with a ton of control. And that's kind of how we navigate those muddy waters.
But so here's another perspective to look at. The people that are coming to you and the people that are coming to you
Right.
care a lot about what they're doing.
Right.
Absolutely.
The other end of the conversation, the people in this room,
Mm-hmm.
the last thing they think about is the broadhead.
Right.
I'm going to go to Walmart and pick up a pack of whatever's cheapest. This is how it goes.
Pack of expandable Allens.
Right. But those same people are on YouTube thinking I need a 200 grain broadhead.
Right.
Or whatever, because they think the arrow weight matters more than what broadhead I'm shooting.
Right.
And I would like to see the conversation flipped.
Try to get it switched around, and I agree. Good luck with that.
Well, yeah.
I'll help you in any way I can.
I just think there needs to be more emphasis. Like, you need to think about what your first question is always what broadhead are you shooting.
Correct.
They might think, oh, I don't know, but they've come to you for arrows.
I get that a lot. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions. I get that quite a bit too, to be honest.
But they know what arrow they want,
Yeah.
and they know what weight they want to be in.
Oh yeah, they want a 550 grain RIP TKO.
Yep.
Or
What
they-
broadhead are you going to put on it? Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to put a giant broadhead on it, it ain't going to work.
No bueno. It
Yeah.
ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I encourage you to listen to that conversation with Troy and Josh Jones and Brandon McDonald.
Was it one of your podcasts?
No,
Okay.
it's on Brandon's YouTube channel.
Okay.
Brandon McDonald's YouTube channel.
All right. I'll look it up.
And Troy's trying to understand more about bows because
Yeah, he's very. Yeah, I'll just leave that one.
he's a
alone.
tune the arrow guy, not a tune the bow guy.
Yeah.
He believes that your bow is what your bow is, but you can work with your arrow if you don't. He thinks tuning a bow might be too hard or whatever the case is.
Right.
So I commend him. He's trying to learn more about how a bow works and by what I mean by a bow, a modern compound bow, because he doesn't have a great understanding of like how you can manipulate it. Josh Jones is the complete opposite. Your bow has to be perfect, and you can take that bow if it's perfectly tuned and take 3 different kinds of arrow combinations and they'll all fly great. Troy's is the other way. You'll have one arrow that works. You'll have one combination of broadhead weight and arrow weight and spine that's going to work. But if your bow's tuned, you can have a couple different combinations that are still going to fly well. You agree?
Fly.
Fly reasonably well, not
Right.
perfectly. See, the
Fly
word,
well is the key.
different what the word well is.
Yeah.
Because
I
you
mean,
fly
are
well
you-
for penetration, fly well for recovery, fly well for
Tuning.
forgiveness, tuning.
Tunability.
And then not to mention, remember, when you say a blow fly well, it's based on the shooter on the hole. It's not a crossbow.
Well, yeah.
You say you fly well under a perfect condition and fly well on a tree stand saddle, on a tree stand or a saddle condition are totally different because the geometry is different.
That's unfortunately another topic that is kind of glazed over is the ability of the shooter. And a lot of it, like John Dudley's points that he's trying to make, aren't relevant to the regular shooter because he is a world-renowned archer. So he can do a lot of different things. He can shoot an animal at 120 yards. Well, I'll never be able to.
Well, it's the same thing by my conversation with Rod White and Jim Burnsworth, and also Tim Gillingham. It's like those guys are shooters. I mean, they are machine shooters.
Yeah.
I mean, they shoot so much. I mean, just like Levi. I mean, even Levi, I remember the time when he first started. I remember when he was just coming out 18, we talked. If he do not practice during the second year or when he was shooting elite, he didn't do well.
Yeah.
He had not built them into a system as fully automatic. He still need to practice. But for the guys like Rod White, like Tim Gillingham, it's pretty much automatic.
Yeah.
They have done so much to the point it's totally in their memory.
Muscle
back.
memory. Yeah.
Yes, they will do well. When they hold the bow, it's going to be exactly 90, the whole rest.
It's like riding a bike.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's something like understanding the consumer, understanding the ability of the shooter. Those things change a lot. And that's probably another reason why, even though it may not be right, 4 vanes and heavy arrows are so popular.
Because
and
it's
why,
so forgiving in so many ways. You make the arrow so slow, and then in most cases you don't shoot far. You couldn't shoot far. Even if you shoot far, the penetration stuff.
and they're like, this is the best thing I've ever shot. And it's like, probably because you're not that great of an archer.
Right. Another one, drop away rest.
Yeah.
That's another one.
Yeah.
I mean, a drop away rest is like fighting a long range rifle and shaw the barrel off.
Well, I don't know. That's where I'm a different ball game.
Why?
You give me a Hamsky Epsilon rest all day long,
Oh, yeah.
and I'll make that bow drive some tacks.
Yeah.
But-
I prefer a drop
But if
away.
you give me something like a lizard tongue to a guy that's not a shooter, we're gonna go fly kites or
Yeah, I'm going to put my bow. I'm going to sell it, and
Yeah.
I'm going to take up golf.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a great. I'm this guy. I'm not a great archer.
Right.
So that's and when I first started toying around with things, I was like, oh, these do fly great. Well, it's probably just because it's hiding how bad I am.
Well, it's the same as automatic transfer to manual. If you are not a good driver, automatic always helped. But then as technology improved, like the draw rest now is so good, it helped you out to shoot.
Yeah.
I mean, when Trophy Taker first make the draw rest, everybody was laughing at it, because you drop the freaking arrow rest before the arrow have the maximum, support. But the fact is that, first of all, nobody's shooting 100 yards.
No.
Nobody had perfect form.
No.
And with that critical condition, the 4-away rest give you the best of both worlds without demanding you to be an absolute shooter.
Right.
I mean, I'll just do an advertising for myself. If people
Well, you got about, not to interrupt, but you got about a minute and a half.
Well,
and then these headphones are coming off.
Right. I got customer come to me and absolutely want to buy the Firenock micro adjust arrow rest. And you know how many people are talking out of it? Because
Right.
I say, if you are not a brand new shooter, you are an old shooter, don't buy it.
Yeah.
You can't shoot it right.
You won't change your form enough to be able to shoot.
Yeah, you won't fusion your form and also your shooting style.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the concluding thought on this is if you want more out of what your bow and arrow are capable of, it starts with you. It starts with your form and
And what you're capable of, and
Right.
then go around it.
Yep.
Go with it, not against it or around
and
it.
then your advancement in your arrow and what that's capable of you can go down that road.
They all grow together.
Yep. But until you can become a consistent archer,
All
then
right.
there it is. But we're getting kicked off here. Thank you guys.
Yes, sir.
And we'll do this again soon.
Yes, sir.